All right, boys and girls, we are back with another edition of the Big Ben Show. I'm your host, Ben Domenech. You can email us at bigben@fox.com. Follow me on X at bdomenech. You can subscribe to my newsletter, The Transom, at thetransom.com, and subscribe to our magazine, The Spectator, at thespectator.com. Today, I have a great big show to you, coming back from the July 4th break with Hugh Hewitt and Lucas Tomlinson. But first off, I want to talk a little bit about what's in the news as it relates to one Jeffrey Epstein. Cut one.
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
That's Attorney General Pam Bondi. Then she had this to say. Cut 3.
Sure. First, to back up on that, in February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I said I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that. Also, to the tens of thousands of video, they turned out to be child porn downloaded by that disgusting Jeffrey Epstein. Child porn is what they were. Never going to be released, never going to see the light of day. To him being an agent, I have no knowledge about that. We can get back to you on that. And the minute missing from the video, we released the video showing definitively the video was not conclusive, but the evidence prior to it was showing he committed suicide. And what was on that, there was a minute that was off the counter. And what we learned from Bureau of Prisons was every night, they redo that video. It's old, from like 1999. So every night the video is reset, and every night should have the same minute missing. So we're looking for that video to release that as well, showing that a minute is missing every night.
Obviously, the Jeffrey Epstein story is one that has dominated the conversation, not just online, but across the media for a very long time. You may have seen many of the different documentaries, the different videos, the different analyses that have come out about Jeffrey Epstein over the past several years. His activities are obviously well known to all Americans who care about these kinds of stories and pay attention to the villainy involved from very powerful people. And of course, there are huge conspiracies that have surrounded both his activities and his death. People who believe that he represented potentially, a foreign power, that he was someone who was bent on creating scenarios where he could compromise major leading figures, using blackmail material and the like. Personally, though, I think that the controversy surrounding his death is actually far less important than what he did during his life. The situation surrounding his death seems to be one that is not going to be resolved, that has a lot of questions surrounding it, has a lot of people who don't believe that he actually killed himself. But to be honest, I actually don't really care whether he killed himself or not. I think that it's less important, and I personally don't believe that asking those questions is as important as knowing the kind of people and connections that he made, the kind of material that he collected about major foreign figures during his lifespan. That's much more interesting and has much more meaningful ramifications when it comes to the behavior of certain foreign leaders. And I think that that's much more justified in terms of the kinds of things that we need to be researching and looking into. The other thing is that I think that when it comes to the FBI, to the CIA, and to other intelligence groups, this is just yet another indictment of the fact that no American really believes or has faith in any of these institutions that are meant to serve us, that are meant to protect the American interest, that are meant to be on behalf of the United States and work in that vein, as opposed to being at odds with, frankly, what the American people want or the kind of security that needs to be on offer for them from these different institutions. Getting back to a point where we can actually have faith in the FBI, the CIA, and the like is very important for the United States. Unfortunately, I don't think that there's enough work being done in that vein. And when it comes to the kind of leadership that has currently been in place over them, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, Pam Bondi, and the like, I think that we certainly can say these are all people who were openly critical of the behavior of the FBI, of the CIA, and of other intelligence entities throughout the first Trump presidency and beyond. Their behavior when under the leadership of James Comey, when you had the kind of commentary from those who claimed the Hunter Biden laptop was something that was a Russian op or along those lines, all those people have been replaced by people who actually had skepticism and had, particular criticisms of the way that leadership behaved. Now, the question, though, always is, are you going to be able to then take the next step and have the kind of reforms internally where the American people can once again trust the behavior of these institutions, that they're working on their behalf as opposed to at odds with the American interest? That's something that I think is really something that this administration needs to be mindful of, because we are not going to just trust automatically that because there's someone at the top who may have our shared ideology or may share the criticism of those who came before, that they're automatically going to be able to shift things back to a point where the FBI, the CIA, et cetera, behaves in a way that comports with what Americans want. Cut 5.
The FBI looks at the circumstances surrounding the death of Jeffrey Epstein. According to the report, this systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. So what happened to the Epstein client list that the Attorney General said she had on her desk?
Well, I think if you go back and look at what the Attorney General said in that interview, which was on your network, on Fox News.
Got the quote.
Go ahead.
John Roberts said, DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen? And she said, it's sitting on my desk right now to review.
Yes, she was saying the entirety of all of the paperwork, all of the paper in relation to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. That's what the Attorney General was referring to, and I'll let her speak for that. But again, when it comes to the FBI and the Department of Justice, they are more than committed to ensuring that bad people are put behind bars.
That's not something that I think the American people generally believe. Not now, not before now, not in the past administration, not in the administration before that. They view the FBI in terms of a political operation, one that targeted President Trump, that went after him in ways that still to this day are getting unraveled. There's a reason that we're still looking at John Brennan, that we're still looking at Jim Comey, America's tallest and most uncomfortable teenage girl, for the kinds of activity that we have understood them to have participated in, which could rise to the level of actual conspiracy and illegal action against a president of the United States, even before he came to the White House and actually took on the office. These are people who we cannot trust. And I don't believe that it should be incumbent upon us as citizens to just assume that because there's a different party in power, we can have any faith that they're telling us the truth about anything. Personally, I think the Jeffrey Epstein story is a dead end. I think that the truth is that his client list and everything related to that is more important and more significant than the way that he died or anything related to that. It's believable to me that this is not something where we were going to find some smoking gun. At the same time, we have learned over the years we cannot have any faith in these people who come out and stand ramrod straight in front of the cameras and behave like America's perfect Boy Scout. It turns out time and again that they're lying to us. And so we are right to ask questions. And we're back on the Big Ben Show with repeat guest Lucas Tomlinson. You can follow him on Twitter at LucasFoxNews. Lucas, thank you so much for taking the time to join me again.
Ben, always a pleasure.
3-time guest. Congratulations.
I mean,
the first Triple Crown here.
I didn't
this
think
is
you'd
good.
have me back after one.
Yeah, so I have a number of things to ask you about, but we'll start with obviously the most serious, which is that you got some stuff out of the President of the United States, which has been top of the line stories, and I always love when you can cross pollinate from the world of politics in the sports world. Let's start with cut 8.
You want me to make a controversial statement? I would. I wouldn't have changed the name, but that's there. It just doesn't have the same. It doesn't have the same ring to me. But winning can make everything sound good. So if they win, all of a sudden the Commander sounds good, but I wouldn't have changed the name.
So, Lucas, you obviously asked the President of the United States about the Commander's name change. I did not ask him about that. I want to clarify because some
called
people
Ben almost immediately
some
afterwards.
people were saying that there was some stolen valor here, but no, I actually did not.
No stolen valor.
I did not ask him about when I did my interview with him. I did not ask him about the name because I thought he would probably say something like that. But I was more curious about the DC Council aspect,
Which was
of
my
this,
first question.
Which was your first question. So you followed up on something that I asked him about back in February, which is basically, okay, there's going to be this big deal for RFK. We can all see it coming with this new ownership for the Commanders, for Josh Harris, working the situation, trying to get back to that RFK site. But we also know the DC Council is a bunch of corrupt people, and they're a bunch of people who also are very slow to act and want to kind of get their,
So you don't think the
little
vote is
scratch
going to
along
happen
the
in
way.
the middle of this month, Ben?
So, no, I think it's interesting. They're going to have hearings in like 3
you're right,
weeks.
right.
So that means that, the
What's
vote's
the
not going
rush?
to happen. What's the situation there? And what do you think the president's attitude is toward it? Do you think that there's a possibility that he's going to step in there and make something happen if the DC Council doesn't move?
Well, Ben, the president said as much, and that's why I asked him the questions. The vote was expected in the middle of this month. We know it's not happening, and they're going to have public forums. Everybody's going to come in. But remember, just a few days ago, the president was threatening to take over all of Washington. Mm-hmm. And that's why I thought maybe it is a good time for that question. And I actually wasn't planning to follow up about the Redskins, but just in the moment, I was like, what the hell? You know? And in that cut you just played, he goes, do you want me to say something controversial? He looked at me, and I was like, I just shrugged. I was like, yeah, why not? Is what I was thinking. Although,
I am a reporter.
Exactly. And, his answer, dare I say, was actually political. He said he wanted to change the name, but he says winning changes everything. And as the Commanders, 12-game winners last year, 1 win away from the Super Bowl, as we remember, said perhaps winning's okay. But then he came back to it at the end. He goes, but I would still change it.
Yeah. So the thing that is interesting about this, by the way, training camp's starting soon. They just unveiled their throwback
today.
Uniforms, which look essentially like their old uniforms, but just with a W on it instead of an Indian head. Look,
good memories from Super Bowl 22, January 31st. It was my 9th birthday, and I still remember watching that game. Doug Williams, the Broncos come up to a 10-0 lead. Everybody think we're screwed.
Yep.
Next thing you know, 35 points in the second quarter. Not enough credit to the Redskins defense, by the way. It's easy to look at the score and say 35. Yes. They had to turn the ball, they had to get the ball back, of course, but I like the jersey.
I like the jersey. So the thing that I'm interested in, though, about this is that I think the DC Council doesn't necessarily understand the risk involved here if they do not come through with this, because I think, especially after the conversation that I had with the president, that you've now had with the president, I think he now views this stadium as being a legacy thing for him, where it's like, you know what, people love it. And you know how he is.
He could have his name on the stadium.
Yes, he outsources
Maybe RFK
stuff.
Jr.
He gauges things. When I was talking to him, he was like, "But you want the stadium there?" And I was like, "Yes, of course I want the stadium there. Even though I live in Virginia, I want the stadium there. It's a beautiful space." He talks about that all the time. And so I think that now that he views that as like a legacy thing,
it's a great point.
He's not going to let that DC Council, that piddling DC Council, stand in his way.
No way. Not when you want to host a future Super Bowl. You've got some World Cups in the future, concert venues. No, it would change the whole waterfront. I mean, it would be Nationals Park on steroids.
Yeah, I think that that's something that's gonna happen in part because of look, his mindset about being a builder, et cetera. Okay, so let's talk about less important things.
Tariffs?
There's, he's out there with these tariffs today, but I actually want to ask you about what he has said about Elon Musk. Cut 7.
I think it's ridiculous to start a third party. We have a tremendous success with the Republican Party. The Democrats have lost their way, but it's always been a two-party system. And I think starting a third party just adds to confusion. It really seems to have been developed for two parties. Third parties have never worked. So he can have fun with it, but I think it's ridiculous.
So how scared do you think the president and those around the president actually are about the possibility of Elon Musk starting a third party, or do they just think it's a joke?
I think they think it's a joke. You know, you saw some of the polling that came out after, only about 4% of people supporting this American.
But Elon keeps tweeting these Twitter polls that show that he's super popular.
I mean, so X is not real life, Ben? Is that what you're telling me? I thought it was real. We're going to get into the Epstein files and conspiracies?
Yeah, that's coming next.
Oh,
okay,
boy.
all right.
No, I don't think they see it as much of a threat. I also asked him in a follow-up, do you want to get the golden key back? Because remember, he had famously given Elon in that send-off from the Oval this golden key.
Let us not forget.
He didn't seem to like it, or he just moved on to another reporter. But Howard Lutnick was standing next to him. Commerce Secretary was laughing. He thought it was funny. But obviously, it's a bad split, but it does seem like President Trump is handling it, as seen from the support he's still getting. And third parties, let's face it, we don't have to go back to the Bull Moose Party to know that third parties have a tough time getting off the ground. Although, I guess, Ross Perot, you could say
so the most successful ones in terms of running presidential candidates have been, obviously, Bull Moose, Ross Perot, Reform. But the thing that I pointed this out in my conversation with Hugh Hewitt, is that traditionally the third parties that actually work the best are essentially single issue or single topic. So they are abolitionist parties, they are temperance parties, they are essentially, they're advocating for one thing, and then they run a candidate that forces a major party candidate to either come in their direction or to have their party itself absorbed into one of the larger parties. And those do work. In fact, historically, they work very well because they end up sort of dominating an issue space that appeals to 5 to 10% of voters, maybe even more, as opposed to being these third-party vehicles that are essentially like a grab bag of stuff. And I just don't think that the Silicon Valley bro grab bag of stuff that Elon cares about, I just don't see it, man. I just don't
Trump's
see it.
got a big grab bag of stuff, too.
Yes, he does. He does. And I think he would compromise it pretty quickly if they actually got off the ground. Talk to me about this Epstein stuff and this feedback to it. I'll play you some sound, but the thing that I think is really going on here is just that people are disappointed. Can we do cut 4?
The narrative has always been that there's video. But what about the video from the island?
Again, we're going to give you everything we can, and people have to remember, we're not going to re-victimize women. We're not going to put that back out there. It's not happening, because then he wins. Not doing it. You want to hate me for it? Fine. Again, logical play out. If there was a video of some guy or gal committing felonies on an island and I'm in charge, don't you think you'd see it?
Right. If you have it.
Right.
But you can't say that you have it.
No, we're giving you everything we have.
And is there video from the island?
Not of what you want.
Not of what you want, Lucas. So that's the moment that we're in right now, in the sense that they have not released the kind of things that are satisfying these right-wing or independent, however you want to call it, podcasters out there who have been waiting for and anticipating some kind of revelatory event. How significant is this? Do you think this is significant, or do you think that this is a sort of thing where people just shrug their shoulders and say it's not there? And the fact is that we have Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino all in there, meaning like these are not the people you expect to lie to you about something like this.
No, these are not the type to sweep something under the rug, especially because of past statements. We have, these guys are all on the record talking about it. I think the majority of people will shrug their shoulders. We live in a 24-hour news cycle. Things come, things go. There's going to be something we're not even talking about that we'll dive into the next time we sit down, Ben. But however, there's certainly a vocal crew out there in MAGA who want to see the tapes, who want to see the evidence. Why is there a minute missing in the video?
Oh, how convenient.
Yeah, which is a little curious, let's be honest. 1 minute missing.
All I could ever think about when it comes to Epstein, or whenever it comes to these the stories that come out about how many are we up to right now? Like something like 17 different Russian oil executives who've fallen out of windows. The windows in Russia, they just must be just
now the
death traps.
Secretary.
but the thing is, whenever I hear that, I just think of the line from mystery men. You know, he fell down an elevator shaft and landed on some bullets. You know,
listen, people love a good conspiracy, right? I mean, it's just with JFK. I don't even want to say too much because I don't want to get hounded. Aren't you looking into this? It's not about a lack of curiosity. My big issue with most conspiracies is you think more people would talk about them, especially in this information age where all it takes is a Twitter handle, a Facebook post, a sit down, or a video you did yourself to release. People would know something more.
Lucas, do you have a favorite conspiracy theory?
Not off the top of my head.
Clearly, he has one, and he's not willing to say it on the air.
But another thing, one thing about Epstein, I saw some posts saying, "Oh, why did he kill himself if there was no evidence against him?" Clearly, the child trafficking and
he was going to go.
Some people were asking, "Why is Giselle still in prison?"
He was going to go to jail, and then he was going to get killed in jail, probably. And so I think look, I think this is a situation where there's not going to be a satisfactory answer for people. I mean, and again, you make the JFK, comparison. Everybody has different theories about that, but it's one of these things where I just don't think we were ever going to get a real answer. And people
are not going to be satisfied.
And people are not going to be satisfied with the evidence that has been released because it's not going to go to what they believe happened. For the moment in terms of the administration, we obviously see them working in so many different areas. They've been so busy. I mean, it seemed like, when I always take off July 4th the week and go and travel with my family. I'm not sure I can remember a July 4th week where there was more news to try to pull you back in than what we saw in this past week, both with the bill passage, the Netanyahu, everything else in terms of the meetings. When it comes to the current positioning of this administration, how do you think that they feel after essentially the first 6 months of being back in office, back in the White House and leading? Are they confident about what they've been able to achieve in that time in terms of setting themselves up for the next year and a half to run into the midterms? Or do you think that there's some stuff that they feel like they mismanaged or kind of left on the board?
I think they feel very confident, Ben. In fact, not just this trip with the president. I was in the briefing room when President Trump came out after the Supreme Court said these national injunctions, were unconstitutional. They can't happen. And President Trump did a victory lap. It was 15-minute warning before the president came out. I asked him a question, quoting a major economist from Apollo Global, said that he might have been wrong about the tariffs and that Trump might have outsmarted all of us. And before I could ask my butt, the president stops the press conference, goes, "This guy, that's the best question I've ever received." And I was like, wow. Daily Mail had a nice write-up the next day. But my follow-up, to be fair and balanced here in Fox News, I said, but some people think your tariffs are going to cause a recession. We haven't seen that. We've seen inflation come down. I know the president wants interest rates to come down. He wants Jerome Powell out of a job. But there's a lot of swagger in this White House. I saw it among the staff aboard Air Force One. I saw it last weekend. I saw it in Iowa when I was out there with the president. I was on that trip as well. They're extremely confident. Let's start with the Iran strikes. Successful operation. It's one of the reasons the Israeli prime minister is here for a third time. He's only been in office about 6 months, and Bibi's making his third trip here to Washington. All right, the stock market's at an all-time high. The one thing looking at the midterms, of course, are going to be, of course, prices. These prices have to continue to go down. But look at eggs. Look at some of these commodity prices. Look at oil.
Yeah.
The gas prices 4th of July weekend, which everybody looks at, it's like a 4-year low.
Yeah, I think that you're completely correct. There's a lot of swagger, and you can definitely see it and hear it when you're talking to them. If you had to gauge what the minefield is ahead of them, what are some of the risks that they're facing in terms of potential problems coming down the pike?
Well, we saw it back when the tariffs were first introduced, floated. Remember, the stock market crashed. Everybody was losing and everybody was freaking out. I think the tariff thing is playing with fire a little bit, because I think one of the reasons the stock market hasn't reacted is people aren't taking it seriously. They're like, oh, is this just a punt? Is this just a threat?
It's a negotiation tactic.
Right.
We're not going to end up having this type of problem. Yeah.
Right.
So.
But, the Peter Navarros of the world want these tariffs in and not to go away. They want the revenue. And I think, commodity prices, historically, a president's popularity goes directly proportional to the price of gasoline.
One last question on this. It seems to me that one of the takeaways from this passage of this big, beautiful bill is that as narrow as things are, the president's power over his own party and coalition is basically unopposed, and he has the ability to get people to do things, even people who have ideological reservations about things, because he essentially is the party. He has the ability to do that. And, if he loses Thomas Massey on a vote, big whoop. However, obviously, there was one significant ramification of this fight over this bill, which was the announcement from Tom Tillis that he's going to be retiring. And with that comes, sort of a symbol of the risks involved when it comes to these midterms, that there's a number of Republicans who are going to be, fighting in potentially tough battles, who, even if the map is in their favor, are going to have very expensive reelection campaigns and the like. Is there any concern on the White House's part that they've rolled the dice on this bill in a way that needs to live up to its promises? Otherwise, they could be staring, a major, midterm backlash, which is historically, the kind of thing that we see, right in the face.
I think there's no question they want to see success with this bill when it comes to prices, the economy. It's very easy to say, if you don't pass this bill, your taxes go up. But are people going to remember that come midterm time? Hey, we said your taxes will go up. Well, they didn't. So now what else? People want to see what's in front. And the thing with Tillis, you got to have the right candidates.
Yeah.
Why is Kerry Lake not in? I have to tell you, in the U.S. Senate, you have to put forward the right candidates. There's been a history in the Republican Party, even before Donald Trump, of nominating candidates that could win the primary but have no chance in the general.
Yeah.
You still have to put the right candidates forward. But there's no question the economy always drives this. It's almost cliche to say, but it's been a great 2 weeks for the president. The passage of that bill, to get it in on July 4th and to stand there in the South Portico as two B-2 stealth bombers.
How
under
impressive
fighter
was that?
It was pretty impressive. I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah.
And, by all accounts, it looks like Iran's nuclear program has been set back years.
Mm-hmm.
He did it, something many presidents had talked about. Many presidents talked about Iran not having a nuclear program. What would be interesting to see is Prime Minister Netanyahu going to get any kind of agreement that if there is evidence Iran does start work on its reactors, start spinning some tubes, could they strike again? Would the president support that?
Last question for you. You had, I believe, a very dadly movie experience recently. You went and saw F1.
I sure did. And when Ben says dadly experience, that means my family was out of town, or otherwise I would have no time to get to the movie theater.
Yes, exactly.
Family was out of town. Good, safe activity. I don't think any man got in trouble for going to the movie theater. Although I noticed my wife put the governor on the Tesla. I was trying to get that thing over 80 on 95, and all of a sudden the alarms were going off, and I'm like, what the hell, put the governor on me? Anyway, you can imagine how much I wanted to drive after the movie. But it was unbelievable, Ben. It was like old school guys kicking ass movie. It was like somebody from the 80s and 90s, no agenda. Jerry Bruckheimer, the director, did also Top Gun Maverick. The thing was, it was Top Gun on the track.
Well, I'm a big believer in getting back to a chain of movies that I believe has been described fairly as competence porn, which is just watching men who are good at a job just doing something.
I mean, listen, Brad Pitt, let's be honest, man. The girls love him. The guys want to be him. I mean, I actually woke up this morning and put my head on the bed and did his little neck exercises that they did in the movie. I was like, let's go.
Let's go. Lucas Tomlinson is on Twitter at Lucas Fox News. Lucas, thank you so much for being a repeat guest on The Big Ben Show.
Ben, I appreciate it. Three-peat.
Yes. Happy to be joined by my friend Hugh Hewitt. You can follow him on X at Hugh Hewitt. Listen to him 3 to 6 p.m. on the Salem radio networks all across this country. Hugh, it's a pleasure to have you come into my abode and join me on The Big Ben Show. Thanks for taking the time.
It feels like when the Browns go to Steelers land, we always lose. So I'm a little bit afraid. I'm more than a little nervous because I like playing at home, not playing away.
Fear not, Hugh. But first off, I do have a generalized question for you. I think that this is a moment at which we can start to evaluate some of the potential people who are going to be stepping into the arena to replace Donald Trump when it comes to the future of the Republican Party. I know that you and I have discussed this before. Who do you think is currently in the catbird seat when it comes to that? And why isn't it Marco Rubio?
I think Vice President Vance is in the cat seat. And I think that if I were laying odds or having to make a bet in Vegas, I'd bet on the vice president simply because when vice presidents seek the nomination, historically, they get the nomination, whether it's Nixon in 60 or Walter Mondale had been vice president, or Bob Dole had been the vice president in 76, eventually got it. Veeps have, or previous Veep nominees have a leg up when it gets started. And the vice president has a better connection with people I'll call MAGAites. It's kind of a misused term. Mm-hmm. I don't even know how big the MAGAites are or what number or percentage they make up of just traditional Republicans. But if such a group exists, and if it is significant and has a material impact, they like JD more than they like anybody else, because JD came in after Trump, not before Trump, has never run against the president. Everyone else has. But I would put Secretary Rubio in that group second, and he's having a very good start at Foggy Bottom. Interestingly, I would put Pete Hegseth in that group, and not a lot of people do, but when you see him, you realize he's a natural talent on television. Again, he's not someone who's run against the president before. Some people on the margins who were much talked about before President Trump ran away with it. Governor DeSantis obviously can do it again. And I think Senator Cotton and Secretary Pompeo, both of whom were thinking about doing it, might still be thinking about doing it. And I wouldn't be surprised if Joni Ernst just took a look around and said, there is no woman in this race. Nikki Haley's not going to get in. I don't think she will. So I'm going to be that person and jump in. So that's my list of probables. Am I missing someone? Doug Burgum, maybe?
I don't think you're missing anybody, but there's always somebody who surprises, and I wonder who that person is going to be, because I do feel like you could have just a random person. Governor Youngkin just went to South Carolina to do a fundraiser. There's someone who's going to represent the kind of old school pro business lane, and that could be Burgum. It could be a couple of other folks.
I should have mentioned the governor. I actually think he is going to run, and I think he's going to do pretty well. And I think he is well positioned in the old architecture of the old Republican Party to be very, very formidable.
The thing that is always interesting at this particular juncture is that we just don't know how things are going to turn out. And it seems to me that a good bit of this question could be resolved on the success of this administration, meaning that if it does have the kind of momentum, if this big, beautiful bill works the way that Republicans seem to think that it will, then I think that you're completely right that Vance is ahead of everything and could basically benefit from that to run away with it. What does it say about the future of the Republican Party if that is the case? In the sense that he represents something that is kind of a unique and different individual than what we have traditionally seen. And it's also something that, frankly, speaks to how much the party and the coalition has changed dramatically in the past 20 years.
Oh, so dramatically. Ben, when I signed my new contract with Salem, I made it through the end of December of 28 because I wanted to see how the story ended before I hung up my boots. And that's not saying I'm definitely going to retire, but I plan on retiring when I'm 72 in 2028.
Please don't. We can't lose Dan Patrick, Jim Nance, and Hugh Hewitt in the space for 3 years.
We all have to get out of the way eventually. There are a lot of talented broadcasters out there, a lot of talented people in media, and it's incumbent upon the older guys to get out of the way of the younger men and women who are coming up. But I'll say this, it's not the party I started out with in 1976. That's my first presidential race, Jerry Ford versus Ronald Reagan. Jerry Ford I was a Ford guy. Mark Levin still calls me a rhino because of that. Mark's a good friend. We work together. Hugh Hewitt's a rhino. He's a rhino. He worked for Ford. You vote for Ford. And that's okay. But that party is so different from this part, your party. Mm-hmm. That party was the three-legged stool, the religious conservative, the free enterprise conservative, the national security conservative, and they all got along. This party is so different from that party. Now, they're all still there. Most of those groups are still there, but there is a blue collar working class element of the new Republican Party, which is cultural as much as it is economic, and very traditional as much as it is revolutionary, that makes the party broader and I think potentially dominant for a generation.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that obviously comes with that, though, is a real, marriage of convenience, where you have these old guard, pro-business, traditional Republicans who are trying to learn how to speak to, work with, and adapt to a reality where you are winning, a third or more of the portions of this country that at one point you thought you were never going to break through and win more than 10%. When it comes to that marriage, what do you think are kind of the key pivot points, the things that really need to be figured out in order to make sure that this is a coalition that can actually withstand the next couple of years and not just dissipate as soon as Donald Trump is not at the top of the ticket?
The only real deal breaker that's in there is if someone comes along who is of the extreme camp when it comes to judicial philosophy and who wants to have some kind of de minimis role for the court, someone who's anti-court, someone who's anti the rule of law, rejects restraints on the executive, rejects restraints on executive power. If that happens, the party could fracture. I don't think tariffs are going to do it. Tariffs really don't matter that much to people, especially not the 10% kind. If you got soft on defense, you could actually have a realignment. You could lose the national security conservatives, but I don't see any of these people being that way.
I don't see it either. Yeah, it's. I mean, even the folks who don't want to use it as much are not saying we need to gut the Pentagon or we need to get rid of that kind of thing.
So if Elon comes along and actually stands up a party, it's going to be an empty room.
You anticipated my next question,
the successful
which is
ability of Mr. Musk to do anything. But to start a political party is a completely different project. And changing one, not so much. Taking over one can be done. Starting a new one, not something I'd want to sign up for.
So historically, Hugh, and I'm sure you're aware of this, third parties that are successful tend to be the ones that are single issue or have a condensed kind of set of issues that are then co-opted or embraced by one of the major parties. So you have the temperance movement, or you have the sort of different aspects of single issue voting parties. Obviously, you have the movement against slavery and things like that then is embraced by the Republicans, et cetera. Do you think that there's even a space for that in this current environment? Because I don't particularly see it. I saw it a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, as being something that could potentially happen if Republicans had rejected the kind of surge of populism that ultimately they embraced. But right now, I don't see that gap in existence. Do you?
No, I don't. And it happened. That moment you're talking about was when Rand Paul retired or took over for his dad, Ron Paul. And the Rand Paul moment was, is the party really going to go libertarian? Hard libertarian, hard no borders, hard no defense, hard no regulation, very, very uber constitutionalist in a way that even strict constructionist constitutionalists are. That moment came and it went, and he did not do well in the presidential primaries. He was on the stage. He had a shot. Didn't work. It's never worked. He works in Kentucky because he's a good guy and everybody likes him. And he's a doctor and he does mission trips, but it doesn't play. Mr. Musk, you tell me, Ben, maybe it's generational. I don't know the appeal outside of his being on the right side of history this time.
No, I really don't. And the other thing that I think is a little bit, I would compare it to something that you and I obviously, we observe from afar, which is this community that's grown up around comedians and people who are weighing in on politics from being a little bit outside of it. And obviously there's the whole Austin scene and the mothership down there and everybody who goes through there. They're interesting people and they have some interesting ideas, but they also don't really have the awareness of politics to stick to it and to understand how to navigate something that actually is a lot more complex. I topped out when it came to building rockets when I was, I think 12 or 13 years old, and I taught some folks, some little guys in my neighborhood how to make model rockets and shoot them off and that kind of thing. And we had a lot of fun with that. They didn't get that much higher than 30 or 40 feet off the ground. So I wouldn't go into Mr. Musk's territory and try to figure out how to do what he does. And I think that he unfortunately showed up here in D.C. with a lot of big ideas and discovered that the swamp is a lot more difficult to navigate than a lot of people on the outside seem to think.
Statute of limitations have run on your rocketeering, Ben, so you're safe. No matter what you hit or whose eyes you put out, you're safe. That's a long time ago. Here's what I like to compare it to, politics and newcomers. When you sit down and start to talk sports, you and I are both sports guys. Your Nationals suck, by the way, but my Guardians are just 15 and a half games out as well.
They suck, but they also just finally fired Davey. I don't think they needed to fire Rizzo, but they needed to fire Davey. Anyway,
I don't want to fire anyone. We're just having a rebuilding year in Cleveland. So the Guardians and the Nationals are both 15 and a half games out. When you sit down and start talking sports, you can tell in about 30 seconds if somebody is a real sports fan. They'll know stuff. Billy Wamsagon made the only unassisted triple play in World Series history. That's not disqualifying if you don't know it, but if you do know it, you're a Guardians fan. And Herb Score getting hit in the eye. They're just things you know. If you just walk into politics, you're like the guy who walks into a sports bar who's never been to a game, picked up a sports page or read SI when he was a kid or played Stratomatic, and you can tell in 5 minutes that they lack. You're nice to them. You don't want to embarrass them. I just think that if you spend all your time being an engineer and an entrepreneur, you have missed a lot of American political history. And even that joke I made about Mark Levin and I on Ford and Reagan, that would be lost on Elon. He would have no idea what that campaign was about.
Yep. No, I think you're completely right, and it's a good comparison. I want to ask you about some of the things that we are currently seeing across this country when it comes to the behavior of the courts. The clashes that have happened on the front pages of the Journal and everywhere else between multiple district court judges and the senior leadership of this administration are just manifold. I mean, it's an incredible level of conflict. What is the proper way to disagree with the courts in this instance? You made reference before to the idea of the dangers of just overruling entirely the courts and everything that they do. What is the proper way for Republicans to go about disagreeing with these courts in a way that actually connects with voters, as opposed to becoming an esoteric legal argument or something where it just sounds like they're calling for these courts to just be threatened into non-existence?
I think the right way is the constitutional way, which is to remind people the way to change the courts is to change the Senate and the president. And there is no other way to change the court. And so if you're interested, I saw someone say this, by the way, not long ago in a message to Mr. Musk. If you're interested in changing American politics, pick some senators and get behind senators in states. We should have 60 senators who are Republican because there are 30 states that are red and there are only 20 states that are blue. Eventually we'll get there. So get behind, pick some senators. They'll pick good judges. Remind people that judges come through a confirmation process and it's lifetime tenure. Don't get mad at the court because Joe Biden wanted to put Justice Brown Jackson on there. She is as left-wing as we expected a Biden nominee to be, and she's going to be an irritant for a long, long time. But we lost that election. And the way to make sure you like the courts is to win elections. There's a reason that 2/3 of district courts are either Obama or Biden appointees, and that's because they've been making the nomination for 12 of the last 17 years. We'll catch up if we win enough presidencies, and they'll age out if we do that. There is one thing I might suggest a Congress that was a little bit more aggressive to do, which is reduce the number of senior status judges. These are judges who retire in place after a certain formula, and they can be senior status judges for 25 years and show up and get to be cranky old men or old ladies. And we really don't need that. We need judges and justices under the age of 75 who know what they're doing, not shooting from the hip and looking for a headline.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if, in terms of the attitude that you have toward this current situation, whether there's something that senators can do other than just pound the desk. I mean, is there something that you think could be done or could be proposed that would actually maybe make these judges hesitate a little bit with how sweeping some of these decisions have been, which seem to just be intended to, a lot of them just on their face are like, this is not going to withstand any kind of, review. It's just a political statement.
Well, I once argued before Judge Reinhardt, who was the most reversed judge in the United States on the Ninth Circuit. And he knew he was going to be reversed, and he didn't care. He just wrote what he thought should be the law, and so he got reversed. There are a lot of new district court judges who, I don't know who picked them. Joe Biden didn't pick them. I don't think he was mentally competent to pick them. But they got up, they got through the Senate. Chuck Schumer loaded up the court. So we're going to have a lot of bizarre decisions at the district court level for a long time. And my advice to conservatives is just trust that the appellate process works. In fact, in the Trump v. Casa case, which is the universal injunction case, the Chief Justice at one point said to the litigants at the bar, to the party that was arguing that they shouldn't strike down universal injunction, said, look, we can move pretty quickly when we have to. You don't have to worry about an out-of-control executive not being checked by this court. It'll get up here. And I think that message is getting through, and it may take a while, but some of these district judges are unembarrassable. That doesn't mean the ones who disagree with a Trump administration. Some of them are incorrigible, and they go back a long time.
There's been a backlash recently online that started over the weekend about the way that the Department of Justice has been talking about this Epstein case situation. I'm as tired of this Epstein case as anybody. We've been talking about it for years. I'm curious what you think about the reaction to that, in the sense that people seem very disappointed to, have a result where there's not some big smoking gun. There's not some big revelation. There's just, basically all these people who said, if we get into power, we'll let you know what happened. And now they're saying, well, unfortunately, the thing we're going to let you know is that there's not more there. What do you think the ramifications of that are, just given that they're basically disappointing the whole host of podcasters all across the country who've been talking about this for years?
I think the impact is passing. And here's my measure. At least in the crowds that I have run in for the last 10 years, since Epstein became a thing, no one ever brought him up because he's such a creep. And it's such a disgusting series of events. And the whole idea of Epstein Island. And we know who went down there and we know who didn't go down there. And it's kind of all baked in. I don't think I mentioned it on my radio program in all the years that it's been front page, other than to say, we don't know anything. Wait for the Department of Justice to come up. And I'm not going to talk about it since it's disgusting. So I'm not put back by this. And that whole world of people who have obsessed on this, I feel sad for them. What a sunk cost. Now, the rule of sunk cost is when you've been revealed to be carrying a sunk cost, offload it. So you ought to turn on a dime and move to something else. But you got to get away. There is no Epstein in Epstein. He killed himself. He was a creep. He realized it, and everything else is noise. And Pam Bondi would have told us if there was a list. She would have. There would have been no downside to that. And the people who now make up a reason for her to lie to us are really lost. And there's nothing we can do for them.
Well, there's something connected to that I want to ask you about. We have a problem, I think, on not just the right, but the left as well, but a problem in American politics as it relates to grifting. There seems to me to be a lot of people who have made a lot of money and have gotten a lot of clicks and views, et cetera, from making some bizarre claims that they construct either intentionally or from a profit motive that have connected with a lot of people in America. And I wonder what your thoughts are, because you've been around the political world for a long enough time to know about the various conspiracies that have been elevated over the years and the different claims that have been made, things that sometimes turned out to be relatively close to the truth, things that sometimes turned out to be completely baseless. What do you think should be done about this grifting problem? Because I do believe that it's real. It's not the same as this, the fake way that the legacy media talks about fake news or things like that. It's something slightly different. But without
it's
having
real.
the kind of gatekeeping that we used to have, how do we deal with this?
It's very real. It's the monetization of outrage, anger, or isolation, so that some people are isolated and don't have a lot of friends and don't have any family, and they go and they spend too much time online, and they find a, quote, family in some obscure corner of the internet that promotes some obscure conspiracy theory. And then you can monetize outrage and you can monetize anger very easily. And that's a problem we're never going to get away from, because the beast we created doesn't, we being everyone who has a computer and does a podcast, we are all part of this ecosystem. You and I are making money. I do, you do, off of podcasts, which we hope people listen to. And then it's up to the responsibility of the podcaster. My only advice to the audience would be, stick with people who have a reputation before they came to the web. And it helps when people have manifestly read some books. I would love to talk to some of these podcasters. Just some. Have you read The Looming Tower? Did you ever read Bruce Catton? Do you know anything about Plutarch? And because most of these, and they're mostly men, are ignorant of most basic things. And with ignorance goes a complete ability to be conned by anyone with a story to sell.
There's in fact, there's a new report out from the American Time Use survey that has been going on for more than 20 years, that was cited by David Shore just yesterday. The death of partying in the 21st century, percent decline in hours spent attending or hosting a social event by age, 25 to 54 down 45%, 15 to 24 down 69%, 15 in all 15 and older down 50%, meaning that people just don't socialize anymore. They don't actually talk to their neighbors and friends. I think this is actually one of the biggest problems we have in this country, which is to say, we used to have regular interaction with people, in neighbors, friends, etc., that prevented us from hating the other side as much as I feel like, or hating just people who disagree with you as much as they do today. And I know that this stretches all the way back to the whole bowling alone thesis and everything else that came out of that. Hugh, as someone who observes this and sees this in terms of the culture from a number of different places, because you live in a number of different places around the country, is there any way to find a way back to having the kind of interaction that perhaps we used to have as Americans with our neighbors and friends?
Here's the oldest fashioned answer that's possible that one would expect from an old guy. Go to church, and it doesn't matter what church it is. It doesn't matter what the denomination is. It doesn't matter if you're a Jew, a Christian, or a Muslim. It doesn't matter if you're a Buddhist. It doesn't matter what denomination within Christianity. Just go on a regular basis and make some friends outside of politics. The biggest problem with my audience, and I'm not going to attribute this to your audience, is that they love politics too much, and they don't love communities enough. And communities need dads who will go put up the pitching machine. The thing I least liked about being a young dad was putting up the pitching machine for machine pitch, which is one level above T-ball, because it never worked. You could never get the setting right.
It was always a pain in the butt. No, I always saw the dads out there doing it.
You establish community with every other dad who had to go through the same thing, and it had nothing to do with politics.
All right, last question, Hugh, because you need to go and do some television for your sins. I'm curious when it comes to the current dynamic of young American conservatives who have been brought up within this new Trumpian environment. I don't know how often you speak to them. I speak to them pretty regularly. And I encourage them to pay attention to history. I encourage them to go back and to read some of these things that are from the before time. I encourage them to read Witness. I encourage them to read, a lot of these things that I think people can miss out on today because they have this kind of wind at the back feeling about the MAGA movement and everything related to that. if you could ask them to read 1, 2, 3 books, things that would actually inform them on that history, to pay attention to it and to learn from it, what would you send them towards, or do you have something in mind that you send them towards when you have the opportunity to speak to those young conservatives?
I do. I always send them to One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, which has the advantage of being a 90-minute read, maybe a 2-hour read.
That's a quick one.
And it is totalitarianism in a nutshell. Then I suggest that they read C.S. Lewis, That Hideous Strength, because I believe that is totalitarianism made more interesting. In that order, those two books. And I think if they get those 2 books, they will understand what genuine conservatism is, which is there's good and evil in the world, and evil often wins, and you just have to persevere when it's winning, and you have to triumph graciously when you triumph. But I do think you're absolutely over the mark. The good news is there are a lot of people like you, and I think of Guy Benson and Mary Catherine Ham and Bethany Mandel. There are a lot of people who are younger and well-read, and I think that the premium that we attach to that is still there, and it manifests itself in the biggest platforms. So while some people can make some money being weird and off the grid, if you're really going to make it in the world of broadcast, news, and politics, you'd better be mainstream in a play between the 40s kind of way, and that requires reading.
Mm-hmm. Well, Hugh Hewitt, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. You can follow Hugh on X at Hugh Hewitt. Listen to him from 3 to 6 p.m. on Salem radio stations all across the country. Thank you so much, Hugh, for taking the time to join me today.
Thank you, Ben, and I'll talk to you on the radio next Friday.
All right, Daddy Gang and Cubs fans, are you ready? You've never seen something like this before. A 1, a 2, a 3. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care. Never come back. So let's root for the Cubbies. If they don't win, it's a shame. So it's 1, 2, 3 strikes. You're out at the old game.
That is one Alex Cooper of Call Her Daddy fame. Dylan, how do you grade her performance?
I think she deserves a lifetime ban from all MLB parks.
Really? I was going to say I think the ghost of Harry Carey should come back and encourage her to commit Harry Carey.
That was bad. That was hard.
That was horrendous. That was terrible.
Yeah.
So my question to you is this, and I assume you've watched the video. I have watched the video.
Yeah, I have.
Was this intentionally bad in an attempt to go viral?
100%. I think
100%.
100% she did it bad intentionally. But, like, I don't know. Like, why would you accept it just to bomb on purpose? I just feel like...
Well, but the thing is, Dylan, I mean, look, this is an icon. This is, you don't... It's one thing to just do this at some random park. I mean,
right.
I don't know. Like, I don't know if, if you go and you do this at the Marlins Stadium or something. I don't know that anybody cares. But this is Wrigley.
This
is Wrigley.
I
mean, come on.
Yeah.
There's some things that have to remain sacred, right?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a Cubs fan, but I just like it's so offensive. I'm sorry. I don't, this is not. My religion is not your TikTok.
maybe we're just not influencer brained enough to understand.
I guess. I just don't get it. I don't get how someone who became famous for the Gluck Gluck, it goes on to have this kind of opportunity and then behave the way that she does. How was your July 4th, Dylan? And did you get struck by another firework?
I was not struck by any fireworks this year, thankfully. We ended up going to a fireworks show out in Loudoun County, where I live, and it was the biggest fireworks show I have ever been to.
Oh, really? Where was it?
So it was at Lee Ellis Park, and there was...
I know that park, yes.
There was, like, tens and tens of thousands of people sitting out there.
Small town America, particularly small town Virginia, takes their fireworks very seriously.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes.
It was crazy.
Yes.
And it was all synced to music. and it was a great show.
Yeah, no, it's the big day. It's the one thing where the guys who wear those like name badges that say community center on it, like this is their Super Bowl.
Yeah, Loudoun County Parks and Rec was like, this is our time to shine.
So I have a question for you about travel related issues. So one Ruben Gallego, the senator from Arizona, who is currently dabbling with the idea, ridiculously from my perspective, of running for president. He was going to the Iowa State Fair. He goes back and forth on these flights that I'm occasionally on. When we go to Phoenix. I have a question for you about politeness when it comes to behavior on the airplane.
Sure.
When you are in economy, do you go and use the first class bathroom?
Never.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
No, I feel like and when I am in first class, which is for my socioeconomic class is rare. It's
rare.
It's happened, but it's rare.
Same here. Yeah.
I prefer.
I'm an economy plus person, basically.
I'll upgrade for that like $30 surcharge.
Exactly,
get a little extra leg room.
Yeah.
But I stick to the economy bathroom. I mean, that people paid for that luxury.
All I have to say is that every time I have been on a flight with Ruben Gallego, he uses the first class bathroom despite not being in first class.
Oh, Ruben!
Yes.
How dare you?
Yes, it's just a constant. He always does it. I saw him do it again. So anyway,
this will ruin his presidential campaign.
The actual thing that I wanted to ask you about is I feel like America. We had this news come down about. Being able to keep your shoes on when it came to TSA. Have you seen this? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
all
I've seen this. Yeah.
So vindicating people like me who never got pre-check and just
me too.
just raw dogged it. So the thing is, they've come down and said you can keep your shoes on, which means that really the only difference between like pre-check and normal is the line and whether you take your laptop out or not.
Right.
I feel like America is finally reaching the point where we might be able to get rid of the TSA. Am I wrong am I being too optimistic? Is this my libertarian instincts kicking in too much?
I think this is your libertarian instincts kicking. Now, I'm not saying we won't get to a point where TSA is no longer needed, but I think that's also dependent on how good technology gets.
Okay.
And also how much incognito surveillance you're willing to submit yourself to.
I agree with that, and part of that, by the way, one of the reasons that I've been thinking about this recently is that I have been using the face scan on the Ballpark app. Have you used this before?
I don't.
So in MLB ballparks, and I don't know if this is true of everywhere now, but certainly at Nats Park, and I know that it's true of others as well. If you take a picture of yourself on the MLB Ballpark app, you can then walk straight into the ballpark. It will scan you as you are going in. You walk.
Okay,
you
I
walk,
have seen stuff like that.
And it just, you don't have to show a ticket. You don't have to do anything. It just scans you. You can even pay with your face, that kind of thing. And I just think that people are going to reach a point where that's like the attitude they have towards travel, and it's just going to be an acceptance of it. And it's both anti-libertarian, but also it doesn't mean that you have the kind of thing that happened to me when I was coming back this time around. I don't know if this guy was just in a bad mood, but he was flagging like every other bag. It was ridiculous. But he didn't flag my wife's bag or my bag. He flagged my daughter's bag. My daughter's bag is the 2-year-old. Okay, she has a little sparkly backpack, and it typically has in it her purse, which is a little tiny like plastic purse that has basically plastic toy things in it. That's it. And her fluffy kitty. And this time around, it only had her fluffy kitty, which is literally like, I mean, it's like about yay big. It's like the size of a loaf of bread, and it's just a fuzzy kitty.
Yeah.
The guy flagged it, okay, which wouldn't be a big deal except for the fact that she then had to stand there for another 12 minutes,
right,
like waiting to get that bag looked at before she could give it back. And when the guy came over, I was like, how could you possibly flag that? That there's just a stuffed animal in it.
Yeah.
And he said, I could flag whatever I want. And I was, and in that moment, you know, you don't want to miss your flight. You don't want to create a scene. My wife is always paranoid about me making a scene in an airport because she's like, well, you know, but it's, we did have someone almost steal one of our bags once, and me making a scene did prevent it. But the thing is, like, that's just power mad crap, man.
It
like
happens.
that just, I know it happened, but like, I don't know. I am hopeful that within my lifetime, we actually get rid of this ludicrous DMV security theater that doesn't actually protect us.
I would love to see that happen. And I've had a similar situation. I was flying home from Ethiopia, which is where my family has adopted some of my siblings.
Oh, okay. Congratulations.
And I was thank you. And I was bringing home a souvenir, and this souvenir was a hand-carved cross.
Oh, I thought you were going to say it was a brick of heroin.
It was
but no,
heck of a souvenir. But it was a hand-carved cross.
Okay.
And they tried to take it from me because they thought that the tip of it was too sharp. And I had wrapped it in saran wrap to keep it protected. So they unwrapped the whole thing, and they're like, this looks sharp. And I was like, you know, I had it wrapped so that it wasn't sharp.
Yes.
But now it is. You made it sharp. They tried to take it. I didn't. I was able to convince them to let me have it. But I would love to see it go away, and I can just walk in. I don't care if I have to walk through a machine that scans my whole body and my bag, and you can see whatever you want. I don't have anything.
Yes.
I've got my clothes and whatever else I'm bringing.
Look, I just think my hope is that at least when there's some kind of generational shift, that we move away from this ludicrous idea that we need to have this massive slew of government employees. If there's one thing that we can replace with AI, can't we do this?
I think so.
Okay.
That's my vote.
You've been listening to another edition of The Big Ben Show. I'm Ben Domenech. My thanks to Dylan. My thanks to executive producer Fran. We will be back soon with more to dive back into the fray.